All right, we're live. I'm just gonna finish pulling up the discussion instructions. But if anyone has anything they want to start off with. How did you guys all find the novel easy enough that we were supposed to read?
Yep.
And, yeah.
So should we just go down through the questions for them?
What?
The questions that are listed on the description of the assignment, should we just go through them?
Yeah, I was just trying to find it. It took me 5 years to pull it up. So, for the first question, it asked about why Yang chose to incorporate the story of the Monkey King.
Let's see.
I think that part of the reason that it was decided was that we, after reading that background stuff on the Monkey King, it was, I think the Monkey King is a cool symbol for how sometimes people want to feel like they need to transform, or people kind of feel like they transform when they're in a different culture. So I think there is some cool symbolism with both the allusion to the Monkey King, but also the monkey robot toy being in the form of a transformer, which is a very Western toy, a very American toy.
I didn't even think about that until you just said that.
Oh, sweet. Well,
there you go.
There's some food for that. Does anyone else have anything to add about that? Does anyone have any a different opinion?
I think maybe he included it. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go ahead, Matt?
You're good. Go.
I think it's also kind of a story that has been passed down for generations, and so maybe he was trying to incorporate that so it was something relatable, but then he was also going to try to make it into something different from there.
Yeah,
I really like
it. He probably heard this story as a kid, so he probably felt some connection to it, and the way he was feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally. The next question: how does this folklore adaptation function in Yang's storytelling? Jerica, I think you kind of touched on that. It's something that's passed down from in families. I think that the function of the story within the story is kind of a good framing device. It's I think it makes the story more personable, really. You kind of feel a connection to Jin, the little kid, because he's the one telling the story instead of just listening to the author. You can kind of feel you're in the story.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know. We all have folklore stories that we learn about, and I just like you said, it makes it more relatable to us, for us to be okay, yeah, this is how it connects and makes sense.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we hear stories that have been passed on for generations and generations, it doesn't seem applicable to us. So I think maybe that's why he made the adaptations, so that the story did seem like you guys said, like something we can relate to now or nowadays, or something that's more prevalent in the world today than as compared to years and years ago. So
the next question was, what societal attitudes, values, or ideals are conveyed or challenged in this book? Where are all my notes? While I was reading, something that I noticed that was interesting was in the but it talked about like, or it showed, because it was a graphic novel, like the differences between like the American kids and Jin and like Wei Chen or whatever his name was, the other Asian student. If you notice, or if you look at the book, I think between like pages like 8 and like towards the end, pretty much anytime there's like any like students that were pictured, all the American students are like very distinguishable in like in their clothing and their like hairstyles and just like the visual representation. If you look back, I know there's like some kids that are wearing like sports jerseys, and some have like dog tags or like camo, which is like very like American, very Western. There's like a girl who just has like daisies on her shirt or like flowers, and I think that that kind of gives just like a visual representation of like American society or like American ideals, because Jin and Wei Chen and I can't remember right now the other little Asian girl, they all were wearing like neutral colors, and if you could see like their shirt and their pants, they were all the same color. These are just very different than.
yeah, I think also something that was interesting is when they were introducing like Jin and the other boy into the school, it definitely emphasized them making mistakes on the name, the teacher making mistakes on the name and where they came from. They just assumed they were from an Asian country when actually he was born in America for Jin, and then just getting things like that wrong, which I feel like is something that happens a lot, is people just assume based off of the way we look and what kind of cultural representation that is just like on the outside of us. So
yeah, I noticed that because like the whole reason like Jin Won becomes Danny, or like the American kid, is because the girl, he like doesn't think he has a chance with the American girl, and that's just like, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of seen as that way of like white people should date white people and like Asian people should date Asian people, and so that was like something that seemed foreign to everybody, but like when they were like out on their date or whatever, like it was totally normal and it's fine, but like from the outside people are like, whoa, like that's weird. So.
yeah.
That's really. The next question is kind of similar. It just says, how does American-born Chinese challenge conventional literary forms and genres? I think just it being a graphic novel that tackles like kind of a heavier, more like complex of like trying to fit in cultural relationships in the form of like a graphic novel, which is like essentially a comic book, should be more like easily comprehensible and like enjoyment. Like that's like a big, something big that kind of challenges conventional literary forms, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And it also, I feel like, going back to the last question of like the like themes that are in it and like the ideas that are presented, I feel like most of the time in a book that would be like a graphic novel, it's like superheroes or like something that doesn't really mean a lot. But this was kind of like giving it a deeper meaning and like that whole main idea of it is different.
Definitely, when I started reading or like found out it was a comic book, I was expecting, like either action or some form of comedy or action or superheroes, and instead it was just like something with a really deep meaning and that could be understood differently by whoever reads it, or can affect people in different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
I totally agree, and I really liked that it's kind of like applicable to everyone, which leads into the next question actually, which is what is the literary value of this book within its intended audience, and what about like thinking beyond that audience? Which, yeah, Jerica gave me like a really good point. It's different for whoever reads it. So because it's in a more simplistic like format, like a comic book or a graphic novel, like it has like a wider like demographic platform essentially. Like anyone can read it, but it's nice that like beyond its intended audience, which is just probably like, I don't know, like people like us, like not middle aged. We're not middle aged, but like younger, like adults. I think that anyone outside of that is able to like read and comprehend it because of the style.
Yeah, I think it maybe I don't know, maybe some parts of the intended audience were it was targeted towards people that were struggling with their cultural identity, and trying to figure out who they are if they've grown up in different cultures, but they are from their parents are from another culture. And I think it could also reach out to anyone who struggles with trying to figure out who they are as a person, not only culturally, but just like in a world where there's a lot of judgment and there's a lot of worldly ideas that shape the way we think and shape the way we act, instead of just accepting who we are. So that can go culturally or, physical looks, how we think, how we act, how we talk. That could it covers a wide variety.
Yeah, and I also think like thinking about it, like for me when I read it, I was like, okay, like the people that it's probably intended for, like you said, Erica, like people who their parents are probably immigrants and they're like dealing with not being the majority or like totally fitting in. And so for me reading it and being, white person, like I think it gave me a better understanding of like reading from his perspective. Because sometimes you're like, oh yeah, like you're treated fairly, like it's not that big of a deal. So I think not being the intended audience, like it gave you a different perspective of like what other people think.
Totally agree. In the last question, it just asks, in what ways does Yang make the ancient legend of the Monkey King relevant or applicable for contemporary readers? Also, I am just now noticing use any like relevant quotes from the text. It said that each person should use two, so I'll try and like find one to tie in with my comment. But if anyone has anything to add right now about how the Monkey King is more relevant for contemporary or more modern readers.
So actually, I do have a quote for that question, and it was towards the end of the book when the Monkey King was talking to Jin, and he says, You know, Jin, I would have saved myself from 500 years of imprisonment beneath a mountain of rock had I only realized how good it is to be a monkey. And I think that could be relevant to like the modern reader, or, you know, somebody reading nowadays, that we could save ourselves a lot of pain and a lot of suffering emotionally if we just accept who we are and just let ourselves be who we are naturally. And yeah.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. So I do have a quote that actually ties in really well with yours. When he's talking to like when Jin is like a child, he's talking to like the old Chinese allergist wife. She says, "Well, it's easy to become anything you wish, so long as you're willing to forfeit your soul." And I liked that because, again, it is kind of apparent throughout the book that Jin kind of wishes that he could fit in, or he notices the differences between himself and his like peers, and so the fact that it's kind of like paradoxical. It's easy to become anything you wish as long as you're willing to forfeit your soul, which is in some opinions, or like in some people's most valuable possession. That's like the essence of your being. And so if you're willing to just let that aside or give that up, then yeah, you can be anyone you wish. But if you like are facing that ethical dilemma, it's like more important to just learn to like be yourself and to love yourself, and to like give up something as important as your soul.
Yeah. And right before the quote that Jerica shared, it says, now that I have revealed my true form, perhaps it's time to reveal yours. And I think, like, when I was reading it, I was like, whoa, I did not expect that to happen. Like, plot twist. But now that, like, looking back on it, I'm like, okay, like, really, like, we sometimes get, like, caught up in the fact that, like, in this book, like, he turned into a different race and, like, ethnicity and, like, totally transformed himself. But sometimes it's, like, just, like, little things. Like, the Monkey King in the beginning didn't become, like, a human. He just, like, made himself stronger and, you know, mastered all the meditation stuff. And so I think that he used that of, like, sometimes we do things to, like, our outside to mask, like, what's on the inside, which fits with everything. So yeah.
I like that a lot. So that was the end of the questions. Does anyone want to add anything else? Like, I know there's another like analysis assignment that's due like Monday or something, but you're like finding a theme and using like literary elements from the text. Did you guys start that yet?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. I like just barely looked at it. I haven't really started it, but it does ask like a lot about the theme. Do you guys find like, have you decided on what your central, like what the theme that you're going to focus on is going to be?
I think I kind of want to focus it on like cultural identity. I took a class a while back. I think it was intercultural communications, and it talked a lot about cultural identity and understanding, or I don't know, kind of seeing life and different points of views and different cultures and stuff, and accepting cultures for what they are and embracing cultures for what they are, and then also understanding your own culture. And so I think that was kind of a theme that was prevalent throughout the story.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. I'm like, I have to like retake intercultural communication, so I'm taking that class right now. And we like literally were just talking about that in class today, like how like ethnocentrism like is like so prevalent in society, and that as soon as you step your own perspective, it's easy to see that like I don't know, everyone struggles with the same things, even though it may not be like exactly your like problem.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, like you said, of like embracing other people's cultures. And I think like that's kind of exactly what we did here. And like we learned the theme of like embracing yourself and like who you are. And we were able to do it through like an old like Chinese proverb or like the folklore of it. And so, yeah.
Anyone have anything else to add before we end it?
I think we covered a lot.
Sweet. All right. Then we can probably bring it to a close, and then you can just like message in the group chat about, because there's like a write-up that goes along with it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
All right. Bye.